Hi, I'm Guy Lawrence, and you are listening to the Guy Lawrence podcast. If you're enjoying this content and you want to find out more and join me and come further down the rabbit hole, make sure you head back to guylawrence.com.au. Awesome, guys. Enjoy the show. Ben, welcome.
What's shaking, dude?
Good to see you, mate. It's been a while.
It has been a while. I like your shirt. No pressure, no diamond.
It's my new mantra. It got me through last year, mate. So I thought I'd turn it into a T-shirt to remind myself.
That's right. That's right. I'm gonna design one and call it pressure, no constipation.
Yes, exactly. Mate, you do a lot of traveling. It's clear to see.
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing you would sit to a lot of new people, strangers say. And if you were on an airplane and one of them asked you, what do you do for a living? What would you say?
F off. Honestly, no. I'd tell him. I'd tell him I'm an author because that's pretty easy to explain. In reality, I'm a human performance consultant, blogger, podcaster, nutritionist, speaker. I own a supplement company where we kind of try to stay on the cutting edge of developing formulas for, enhancing the body and enhancing the brain. And, I do some investing and some Bitcoin mining and, so yeah, I mean, like,
They could go anywhere.
I tell the little ladies though that I'm an author so their eyes don't cross over.
Yeah, fair enough, mate. And the one thing, like, is obviously, like, I've seen you, been following you for years, mate, on the net, right? And what you're doing, and you're always evolving, you're always growing, you're always doing that. But one thing I keep asking myself is how the hell does he retain all this information? Like, is there a secret formula to it, mate, or does it just skip right past, or what goes on in that mind of yours?
I typically have a few rules set when I'm learning. For example, I have a rule that when I'm reading, I'm not allowed to turn the page backwards ever, or on the Kindle, flip the page backwards. And that ensures that no matter what is on the page in front of me, I'm reading with intention because I know I may never see it again. And that's a huge boon for me when I'm getting through. I read about a book a day, and for speed reading,
Wow.
that helps tremendously. In addition, for the book a day piece, reading is a muscle. The more that you do it, the better that you become at it. But I will generally review the table of contents, skim each chapter, skim the index, skim the front, skim the back, and then go through each chapter. And tasks will expand to the time allotted. So I'll generally allow myself between about 9 and 10 p.m. to do most of my evening reading. I just have a little red light set up in the bed. I don't have I don't have a completely absent social life or sex life. And so sometimes, it's 10 to 11 or 11 to 12 sometimes, depending on how the day happens to be. But I always finish with back. I always have a pen in my hand so I can circle anything, or I'll use the Kindle highlight. And that helps me know that if I do see something very interesting, if I want to interview somebody about it on my podcast, I fold the page over and underline it, or I highlight it on the Kindle. That's generally how I'll go about learning from books. If you see me working out, I will a lot of times have earbuds in. When I'm cooking,
Yeah.
I'll have earbuds in. I'm exercising, when I'm cleaning. It's always some kind of an audio book or a podcast. And so I generally don't waste a lot of time listening to, I shouldn't say waste time. Music is amazing. Music is a wonderful tool. Music enhances your vagus nerve health, and music is a great way to even increase if you believe in quantum biology, like the vibration of particles within the body. I mean, music has a lot of great effects, but I'll generally save music for dancing or for sex or for, some kind of a fun background dinner music. But if I'm just, banging away at something, 9 times out of 10, it's an audiobook or a podcast. So I do a lot of learning through my ears. I do a lot of reading. And then the one thing that I don't do a lot of is park myself in front of a screen, because typically the human brain can process information faster than a documentary or a film can present it. And so when I'm listening to audio, I can multitask, right? I can work out, or I can clean the house or the garage or whatever. When I'm reading, I can read at the fastest possible pace that my mind can process information. When I'm watching a documentary or film, I can't do that. So generally, even if I'm, wanting to digest a documentary or go through a documentary someone has recommended to me, I'll often convert it to audio and then speed it up a little bit and listen to it that way. So yeah, I mean, I have a constant stream of information, and probably the one last thing I'd say about that would be that I try to keep a clear head, meaning that I've got Evernote synced on my computer, my Kindle, and my phone. And so anytime I think of anything that needs to be done, I'm either opening Google Inbox and adding a reminder, or I'm adding it to Evernote. So, I mean, anything. My wife knows that she can't tell me to like go get the milk at the grocery store unless it's written down, because I've trained myself kind of like Sherlock Holmes when he first meets Watson and says, "Oh, I'll try to forget your name," because Sherlock Holmes wants to keep his head clear for the crucial that he needs to draw upon. I try to keep my head clear of all the clutter and the to-do tasks and things like that, so that I'm able to focus on the very relevant information that I need to process during the day.
Yeah, amazing. And you're hungry for it, right? Which is a key ingredient as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to, of course, have a way to apply the knowledge. And that's a really great point too, because you want to be able to digest knowledge in a manner that would allow you to teach that knowledge. So whenever I am listening to a podcast or an audiobook, or I'm reading a book, I am imagining that at some point I'm going to need to teach that to someone, right? I'm going to need to be talking about it on a podcast, or teaching it to my children, or talking about it to my wife, or the old lady on the airplane who asked me what I do for a living. I just got to be able to rely upon that information and present it. And so I listen or I read with intention and purpose. And if I'm reading something or listening to something and I realize that there is no intention, there is no purpose, and it's not going to serve my purpose in life, and my purpose in life is to empower people to live a more adventurous and joyful and fulfilling life. If something doesn't pass through that filter, I'm sorry, even if it's entertaining and it's funny and it's, people send me these podcasts that are, like the Joe Rogan podcast, and, some of these comedy episodes and some of these things that talk about politics. And frankly, I'm a complete dummy and I turn most of that stuff off and I don't know anything about it, because my passion is health and fitness and nutrition and empowering people to live this joyful and adventurous and fulfilling life. And so entertainment doesn't fit the bill for that. Now, probably the one exception to that would be fiction. I do like fiction, but even fiction, I really appreciate, and even the fiction that I write, I appreciate fiction that kind of reflects some real world, application, or that really kind of allows me to even de-stress and remove myself for a very brief period of time from being in the real world, which I realize might sound like it stands in stark contrast to what I was just saying about, nothing serving my purpose. But if it allows me to just briefly kind of check out and de-stress, like I do enjoy a good work of fiction every once in a while.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, mate, just to put you in the picture, this podcast, I kind of generally go for things that inspire change in people that, want to overcome different parts of themselves and move forward in life and not feel like they're kind of being held back in different areas. And with a guy that's got so much going on, like I know you started a new supplement company, Keon. I'm not sure exactly when it was, but I kind of started seeing that coming up on the radar as well. Like, do you ever doubt yourself? And what is your relationship with doubt, if you do, and how you get through it?
Yeah, I doubt myself every day. Every single day I ask myself, am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right place? Am I fulfilling the purpose for which I've been placed on this planet? Have I developed the wrong sense of purpose? Should I go back and start over again and be a poet or a musician or a painter or a stand-up comedian, which would really suck, or something like that. And ultimately, when I question that and I have that doubt, one of the things that helps me best is to identify the activities in which I enter a state of flow. Now, I enter a state of flow when I am writing. I enter a state of flow when I am speaking on stage. I even enter a state of flow when I'm podcasting, which is kind of like speaking on stage. I enter a state of flow when I am competing on the field of battle in a Spartan race or a triathlon or a tennis match, for example. I enter a state of flow when I am painting. I enter a state of flow when I am playing music or singing music. Those activities I have all identified as key activities that fulfill my purpose in life. And when I'm engaged in those activities, those feelings of doubt completely melt away. So I think that you need to identify not only your purpose in life, but you need to make sure that when you are engaged in the activities that you think align with that purpose in life, that you really are able to enter a state of flow without the use of, say, psilocybin or LSD or holotropic breath work or any of these other hacks. And if you can do that, then it's a pretty good sign that you're doing what you're meant to do, and you really don't need to doubt that.
Yeah, fair enough. Good answer, mate. And regarding then purpose, have you always kind of been like fortunate? Because it's clearly you're on purpose now, but have you always felt like you found your purpose early in life and have been able to just refine it? Because
No.
that's when did that start to kick in, and how?
Maybe 2 years ago. And while I have always had those activities that I enjoy, I've always had that childlike approach and wonder and curiosity for all things having to do with the human body and the human brain and physiology and biomechanics. It was really just a passion and a personal interest. And it really, until a couple of years ago, I was just a dude running around in the forest with my shirt off, throwing spears at hay bales and, writing books. And I had my own personal brand, but I was just, Ben Greenfield, the kid just running around. There are probably two things in life that happened that gave me a distinct sense of purpose. One happened before that point that kind of started me down the road to wanting to identify my purpose. And that was the birth of my children. When you have children, you really developed a distinct a distinct interest in legacy, in building something greater than yourself, in creating human beings who will grow up to be resilient young people who can live to make this world a better place. And I would say that it kind of put me into a tight funnel that began to push me in the direction of finding purpose, but it didn't exactly give me purpose, but it pushed me in that direction. And then really, I discovered my purpose through a great deal of prayer and meditation and solitude, and even the use of some of those entheogens I mentioned earlier, psilocybin particularly, along with a great deal of journaling. And I came to the realization that my purpose in life was greater than just, playing around in races and writing interesting blog posts and creating books, and that I instead wanted to create a company that would empower people and equip them to get the most out of this amazing life that we've been blessed with on this planet, specifically to live this adventurous, this joyful, and this fulfilling life, right? To enhance mind, body, and spirit, so that you can go out and you can climb your own personal Mount Everest. You can have a hell of a time doing it, and you can be fulfilled in the process because you've identified your true purpose in life. And if I can help people to do that, to empower people to live a more adventurous, joyful, and fulfilling life, and if I can create a company, in this case, Kion, my company, and Ki is prana, life force, chakra, spirit, soul, it really is that essence of living out your purpose, then I'm pretty damn happy with that. But it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I really made the commitment to go big or go home, and to actually really identify my purpose in life and really live that out to the fullest.
Yeah, beautiful. And you mentioned about journaling, meditation, prayer, and having that downtime, alone time. And I heard Mark Divine say this once: "But in the silence, he found himself." Is that what you've kind of finding from that? Because it's very easy to tell ourselves one thing, that we could be on purpose and so forth, but there might be deeper truths underneath that we haven't even considered or looked at.
Silence is so underemphasized. You know, when you, as I believe it was Dallas Willard who said this, that you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. And when you do that, you identify little spots of silence and solitude that you can experience in your life. My children just this morning both spent 15 minutes doing their sit spot, which is a Native American technique where you go out in nature and you sit and you simply observe with your eyes and you taste with your mouth and you smell and you hear and you feel the ground and you're just sitting there mindful in solitude. And my children have been doing that since they were 5. They have their own sit spot in the forest that changes with the season. And sometimes if the weather's really bad, they'll instead go into the sauna, and I have an hourglass and they just watch the sand fall, and they're quiet and they sit in silence. And sometimes we'll do a candle instead of an hourglass. And I do the same. And the reason for this is because, yes, you find direction and purpose often not in the conferences and the Tony Robbins seminars and the inspirational podcasts and the books and the go, go, go mentality with the masterminds and the meetups, but you instead find it in the silence. And actually the prayer that I say every morning I swim in the cold, cold water. And I like the idea of having a sacred place that you go to when you're going to pray, when you're going to come before your higher power. And for me, it's typically the sauna or it's the cold pool. And when I go back and forth in the cold pool, my prayer is as follows. It goes like this. My Father in heaven, please turn me into a man who will honor you, who will be a good father and husband, and who will fulfill your great commission. Please remove from me my worldly temptations. Fill me with your heavenly wisdom. Grant me your peace, your love, and your joy, and teach me how to listen to your still, small voice in the silence. And that's how I end my prayer. And so every day I'm praying that I would receive direction and wisdom in the silence, which means that every day I am actually kind of I'm obliging myself to identify a time when I actually sit in silence, because it'd be kind of hypocritical to pray in the morning that I would get wisdom in the silence and then never create silence in my life. So yeah, there's a great deal of benefit that comes from the solitude and the silence.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, Ben. I appreciate it, man. Now, I need to ask you before we change gears into a few questions, ask everyone on the show, mate. It'd be rude not to have a podcast without hacking. But with everything you've experienced in all this time that you've been, searching, looking, investigating, applying, practicing, measuring, whatever it may be, like, is there anything that's been like a standout that's kind of caught you and gone, wow, holy shit, man, even I didn't expect this, or in all that time?
Probably the power of breath work, which we know as prana in Eastern medicine. It's one of the reasons that I named my company Kion after the idea of ki, which is what I actually have tattooed on my shoulder now, this Japanese kanji symbol for ki. And the reason for that is that from breath flows life. Even if you look at the story of, creation, for example, that was how it's written that God, breathed life into man, breathed life into dust, and that's how he brought man forth. And we also have this idea that if we stop breathing, we die. And yet so many people underestimate the power of breath. The highest I've ever been drug-free was via the use of holotropic breath work, which you can identify or learn more about if you look up the work of Stanislav Grof. And the idea is that via exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, you can bring yourself into some really interesting states of decreasing emotional stress, enhancing health and oxygenation, enhancing alkalinity, blowing off acidity, retaining carbon dioxide so that you deliver oxygen more readily to tissues, entering into states of meditation, into states of trance, into states of higher mindfulness, into states of greater consciousness. This idea of knowing how to breathe is incredibly useful. My boys are 10 years old, and we went on a walk yesterday. And on our walk yesterday, and we'll often do walks like this. The walk went as follows. You breathe through your nose, 4 count in, 4 count hold, 4 count out, and 4 count hold, all the way to the first telephone pole with your hands on your stomach. So you're engaged in deep diaphragmatic breathing. And then you take a giant breath and you hold your breath for as long as possible as you approach the next telephone pole. You recover through your nose, and then you rinse, wash, and repeat to the next telephone pole. And we did this for a half mile out and then a half mile back. So it was like a 25-minute walk. And the whole time, the boys are learning how to breathe properly, how to control their breath, how to hold their breath, how to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. And I really think the importance of breath is severely underplayed in our modern society of, shallow chest breathing and stressful breathing.
And the impact on it. Yeah. I wasn't sure what the answer was going to be, but I'll certainly agree with all the breath work. That's for sure, mate. I'm pretty aware that we're pretty tight for time, but I have a set of questions I ask everyone on the show.
Yeah, sure.
And what new habit have you had that over the last 1 to 2 years has had the greatest impact?
Oh, a new habit.
Mm.
My long-standing habit has been a really good cold shower each morning, or a cold soak, or a cold jump in the pool. But for a new habit, I would have to say the use of what is called photobiomodulation, meaning that I own infrared devices, one called a Juve, another one called a Vielight. I also have been doing a lot of nude sunbathing. You got to be careful. Make sure your neighbor doesn't own a drone or live in a house if you do that. But the use of near and far infrared light to enhance collagen production, beauty, nitric oxide production, even testosterone, which is why I do it nude sometimes. It's pretty profound, and I really underestimated the power of light to affect some pretty cool physiological change.
Yeah, cool. And what's one of the low points you've had in your life, but has later in life turned out to be a blessing?
One of the lower points that I had in my life was, I guess it would have been about 6 years ago. I cheated on my wife several times, all, just drunk at parties and off, just not being a good person. And, when I eventually told her about that, just seeing her slip into a state of depression for weeks, and seeing our relationship completely dissolve before my eyes, and feeling like I'd lost everything and hurt her more than a human being could ever hurt another human being, just tore me to pieces. And I entered an extreme state of low and thought about just giving up and walking away, and admitting the fact that I'd failed as a father, failed as a husband. But what I decided instead to do was just, pour as much love on her and on my children as possible, be there for them, sacrifice for them, spend time with them, just basically be fully present for my family in every scenario possible, in an attempt to mend that relationship and show that I really truly was committed to the legacy of my family more than I was to some kind of polyamory or some type of cheating type of relationship. And I was able to come out of that, through sacrifice and through love. But I was at a pretty low point where I really thought that I just kind of, I'd lost all that legacy that I mentioned earlier, so important to me.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, mate. What does your morning routine look like? And you can do a brief version if you want.
Yeah, how much time you got? Basically, I get up, I put on the coffee after I do my gratitude journaling, and while the coffee water is boiling or heating, I do a series of stretches and deep tissue work to kind of wake up the body, a little bit of inversion, hanging upside down, just kind of wake up the body, get a feel for how it feels for the day. That gives me good momentum going into the day. Then I grab my coffee, and I'll typically slip downstairs, and I'll do at least 20 minutes of writing. If nothing else, if I can get 20 minutes of writing done during the day, I can write a novel a year doing that. And then once I've gotten my writing done, I'll go upstairs. I'll use the restroom. And then in a fasted state, I'll do about 30 minutes of very easy exercise, preferably out in the sunshine, to jumpstart the circadian rhythm. And then I'll finish with that cold soak or cold shower that I mentioned. And then I launch into the day of work.
Yeah, wow. Do you ever feel like going, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna just lay in bed, or you just every day you just can't wait to get out?
Never. I can't tell you the last time I had that feeling. No,
Yeah,
I, with this purpose in life, and even before that, I've just, I think I'm a little bit hardwired for productivity as it is. Perhaps, I was homeschooled and never really learned this concept that you can't just leap out of bed and accomplish a ton of stuff every single day. And so I was never into like video games or TV or anything that would consider a waste of time. I just get up and go and crush the day.
yeah, beautiful, man, beautiful. Mate, a couple of questions left. If you could have lunch with anyone tomorrow, from anywhere in the world at any time frame, who would it be? Do you reckon? Who would you choose?
At this point, I'd choose Richard Branson, a guy I haven't met yet, who I'd love to hang out with. He's got a real joy for life. He's smart, he is successful, and he seems to have a pretty good purpose for life. And I think he'd be a real fun guy to have lunch with.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, he would be a great guy. What's the one thing about yourself most people wouldn't know, if that's possible, because you put everything on the internet?
I'm not naturally an athlete or a physical specimen. I have to try really hard to maintain everything from coordination to balance to mobility. I don't come from an athletic family. And so for me to be a pro athlete is a constant uphill battle, but that actually fuels my fire, in terms of, really ensuring that my fitness, my nutrition, my biohacks, everything is just spot on, because I've had to really kind of fight an uphill battle to really be able to compete at the level I try to compete at.
Yeah, interesting. You've just given a lot of people hope, mate. That's for sure. Mate, is there anything else you'd like to add for our listeners of everything we covered today, from purpose to the self and everything, that you'd like to leave them to ponder on before we wrap up the show?
I guess the last thing I would leave you with is this, one of my favorite quotes. This one comes from the Bible, and it goes like this: what does it profit a man, or it could be a woman, what does it profit a human, if you gain the whole world, but you lose your own soul? If you gain the whole world, but you lose your own soul. So remember that as you pursue anything from a six-pack abs to cognitive enhancements to running a marathon to, playing a new instrument, to anything that you're trying to develop, remember that the most important part of you is your spirit. It's your soul. That's the one thing that people can't take away from you. So make sure that you really develop a good spiritual practice of gratitude and peace and love and joy and everything necessary to enhance the health of your soul along with your body and your mind. Because if you have a whole body and a whole mind and a whole spirit and a sense of purpose, like I discussed earlier, you're going to be a pretty damn happy and fulfilled human being.
Yeah, amen to that, man. Thanks for sharing that, man. And for anyone listening to this that wants to check out more for Ben Greenfield, where can we send them to, buddy?
BenGreenfieldFitness.com is my blog and my podcast. And then Kion, my company, is just getkion.com, Kion. But if you just go to BenGreenfieldFitness.com, you'll find links to Kion. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, we'll link in the show notes anyway when this goes live next month. Ben, awesome. Thanks for coming on the show, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man.
You're welcome, dude.
Cheers.
Cheers.